Okay, hello everyone again, for those of you that were there before, and hello to those that weren't. So it's great to have another chance to go through this, because I remembered that there was a few things that I didn't mention. Yeah, the mainstream garden foraging thing's quite important, especially at this time. I think we're going to have to be more resilient, as this pandemic continues to roll out, and all the other big things that are going on in our world, like the mass extinction event and climate emergency. So learning to forage in our own gardens and where we are is a really important skill for our food and medicine. And I do it every day, and I have a special garden that enhances that. And I'm hoping that you'll get some ideas, even if you're really experienced today. And yeah, mainstream foraging in your garden is something I'd really like to see, because we all have gardens, or if we don't, we have somewhere close by. I know not everyone's lucky enough to have a garden, but most people do. And it's a place where we can freely experiment and learn things. So it's a really good way to learn to forage. And forest gardening is a way of enhancing our gardens to be more forageable. Okay, so I'm going to put a slideshow on. So I'll tell you, it's in two parts. So the first part is looking at permaculture principles applied to forest gardening, and the second part is how to forage a super salad. So, and I've got a little slideshow, and I'm going to answer some questions at the end as well. And Paul might ask me some more later too. And we're hoping to do this in half an hour. Yeah, great. Right, so I'll share my screen and put the slideshow on. And start the slideshow. Ta-da! Okay, so this is a super salad picture, and this is you can see aqualegias and dandelion flowers and things. So this is sort of an early summer salad that was harvested in May a few years ago. And it's amazing that there's so many edible things in the garden already. In most gardens, I find 25 to 50 things without even trying very hard. So that means that every garden has something in every day of the year. Right. So a little description of what permaculture is, just in case you're new to it. And even if you're not, I love hearing what permaculture is, because it's so fab. Take my foraging hat off until we get to the foraging bit. So permaculture stands for permanent human culture, and embedded in it are the three ethics of caring for the earth, caring for people, and fair shares. And when we have all three things together, that's when we have a permaculture solution, combined with principles, which is something we're going to go through in a second. So the permaculture sweet spot is when we hit all those three ethics together, and applying the principles is the tool to help us get there. So the principles of permaculture applied to forest gardening are really, I think, really inspiring, and help make a lot of sense of the design process. And while I'm talking, I'd like you to just think of somewhere that you spend time outside, if it's your garden maybe, or somewhere else, so that you can visualize these principles as we go through. If it's your garden, you could also think how you could add this principle too. So in terms of forest gardening, I like the idea that we don't actually do forest gardening, but garden like a forest as a principle to approach it. Because actually forest gardening, the name sort of, it doesn't quite, it's not really a forest that we're making, it's a woodland edge because of the light in our country. The term really comes from tropical forest gardens where it's all dense canopy, but our forest gardening in the UK is more like a woodland edge. So that's, so I find that gardening like a forest is the way. So it was a revelation for me when I did my first permaculture course with Patrick Whitefield, and he got us to stand in a field, and he just said, just imagine what the land wants to do. And for the first time, I'd actually gone through a degree in landscape architecture at this point, and I'd never experienced this, which I don't know, just never came up. but I actually saw that the land wanted to become a forest. And when I understood that, it was like a major revelation, and it's inspired me ever since. So just having that in mind is really good place to start with forest gardening. And the more that we can garden like a forest, like having lots of different species in the system and covering the soil and encouraging wildlife and being gardening like a forest, so that everything in there helps garden. So the worms help dig, the birds help fertilise with their potassium-rich poo, and all the leaves create mulch, cover the soil, and of course there's all the products of the yields that we can get, like fruit and food. This it's quite diverse. And also it was a big aha moment for me when I realised that we are part of the wild systems, the natural systems, and it's really obvious. I know we are, we can't not be, but to actually feel that we are still connected to the earth in this way was just an amazing realisation for me. We are part of the wildlife, and I like, when I make these gardens for people, I call them like wildlife gardens, where we are part of the wildlife. And actually everywhere is a forest garden. So when you go out, I have got a story, but I'm not going to tell it now, but it's just like, when you start tuning into what you can forage in the succession of the year and everything, you realise that everywhere we go, there's food, forests. So I mentioned succession. So that's when a land wants to become a forest again, there's a number of stages it goes through. And when we mimic that, that's really helpful. This picture here is me gardening on a roof, actually. It's not even on the ground. It's amazing. So we start with ground covers, annuals, to cover the soil completely in the way that a natural system would do. So there's ephemeral plants to start with, and annuals, and then biannuals, and then the perennials start. And when you see brambles, they're an awesome plant to forage. They've got a lot of medicinal qualities as well as food, like blackberries, but they also provide nursery protection against rabbits and deer and other things for little baby trees. So they all have a ecosystem service too, as we do.
What was the plant that creates that?
So I think a bramble.
Bramble.
Like a blackberry, yeah. So any thorny plants have a protective, their thorns are there to stop animals eating them. So brambles are particularly good at creating a good place for small trees to, like a nursery tree.
Yeah.
Okay, so gardening in this way is about minimum effort, because the more we do this, the easier it is. And we don't have to do so much weeding, because there's no weeds, because there's no space for them. And even if a few weeds do get in, they usually like food. So we do a chop and drop there, and it just adds another nice bit of mulch to the ground. Stacking's a brilliant principle. So these principles are ecological and observed in natural systems. And that's where permaculture principles come from originally. And we can see in any system there's more than one plant. We don't have monocultures in natural systems generally, except in extreme situations. Generally, there's a huge amount of diversity. So 7 layers came about through Robert Hart's design, but we can have more or less depending on our situation. So the 7 layers include the big tree, the smaller tree, the shrub, etc. And I'll go through that a little bit more when we do the foraging section. Diversity, this is my garden, and I love my garden. I spend a lot of time out there, and it's full of food. And but everything's edible if you know how, which is one of my foraging principles. So there's a huge amount of diversity, and the plants don't just provide food, they provide pollination, they provide wildlife homes, they provide food for plants. So they all have lots of uses, and all them important functions have multiple sources. So I have like something like over 20 fruit and nut trees to provide food from probably, I don't know, for 8 or 9 months of the year I'll have fruit in the garden. Okay, another lovely principle is waste is actually an unused resource. In a natural system, there's no such thing as waste. And actually waste is a form of pollution. So it's a really exciting principle to work with in any human system. Okay, and we use resources responsibly and efficiently. And that's one of the National Forest Gardening Scheme, their own principles. Okay, beneficial functional relationships. I've already mentioned it's all about relationships. And a nice thing about forest gardening too is that it's a great metaphor for everything human. So permaculture is still seen as a gardening system, and forest gardening is a popular permaculture technique. But actually, it can be applied to everything in our human world. And seeing the garden as a metaphor really helps us. And the relationships go under the soil as well with the mycelium networks, which we don't see. There's a whole hidden world there of soil life. So I've got polycultures here too. So that means putting lots of different plants together. So which, like, we call them guilds when they all have their own roles and that you put them together, and it makes a polyculture, so a many planted culture. Oh, this same slide as earlier. Okay, so that's the permaculture principles, and I'll just say that's a beautiful forest garden in Ramsgate for Mariette and Tim, one of my favourite places in the world. We've been experimenting together over many years. I don't know if you can you see me, Paul? Can you see a picture of me, Paul? You still there? Hello? Paul?
Sorry, just unmuted myself. Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, just you saw me put my hat on. Right, we're on the other bit of the talk about my super salad. And on the night when we gave this talk, I was asked to do more about plants. So I'm going to do a little bit more about plants. There will be hopefully a little film of me foraging in the garden that goes along with this.
There will, Joe.
Great. I wanted to show you the reason I made the film. I'm hoping to do more films to help inspire people to do garden foraging. But the film I made for this talk shows me harvesting over 100 things for a salad in literally a couple of meters. So I wanted to show you that almost everything's edible if you know how. In fact, I think everything's edible if you know how, but you need to know how. And that's the number one rule. You need to be 100% sure of what you're eating, or else don't eat it. And that goes with everything to do with foraging. So on the 23rd of April, it was actually St. George's Day. And these are some St. George's mushrooms. They're hard to get mixed up with anything at this time of year. And so they're quite a good one as a beginner mushroom, but I still check and double check, even though I harvest them every year. The most poisonous mushrooms that I know of are just white mushrooms, so you have to be really careful. So the rule with all foraging, which is a good one, is to learn the poisonous lookalikes, and that can save your life. So that goes with mushrooms in particular. And on the right is the basket that I harvested that day. Because that was a week and a half ago, so it's the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you today. And there's already different things around. So you can see there's a picture of some lilac flowers. So they got, that was a very delicious salad, I have to say. So yeah, I had it later with a very nice salad dressing. Someone asked that question at the last talk. So all these salads taste fantastic. There is a way to do it, which I'm going to share with you in a sec, but making a good salad dressing is pretty important. Okay, right. So I've been foraging about 25 years. I started with mushrooms, and I started doing public walks and talks in 2008, and I worked out I've taken around 1,000 people foraging. And I have to say, the way I learn plants to eat is mostly through sharing that information with others. It's a brilliant way to learn. I've also used a number of books, which I've listed some resources at the back, picture guides like Richard Baby's Food for Free and other websites. So getting that knowledge, that plant knowledge, is really key. And I have to tell you, I started with probably knowing the least amount of plants than anyone possible. So I knew what a daisy was, and I knew what a blackberry was, but without the flowers or berries, I couldn't tell you. That's all I knew. I didn't even know the name of an oak tree until I started my landscape course. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. And it's a bit hard to learn plants when you haven't got people around who know what they are, but you do. That's the thing. You just start with what you know. And I keep telling everyone to eat their nettles. It's still brilliant to eat nettles now. They're superior vegetable, but obviously not in a salad unless you like. You can wave them over a kettle, and it gets rid of the stingy bits. And you can eat them raw. There's a special way to do it, but that's for a walk. So safe foraging, basically be 100% sure of what you're eating. And the other thing is be careful of where you pick. I live in the countryside, and we've had farmers spraying today, so I picked these earlier, but I won't eat anything in my garden now until it rains, unfortunately, in my back garden. But I've got a front garden too, so I'm very lucky like that. So yeah, so be careful of where animals might have been, and if it's on the ground, wash it. I try not to wash things unless I have to, so I pick things in places where I think they're going to be clean.
What have you got there, Jo?
Oh, this is a dandelion leaf, Taraxacum officinalis, and most people know a dandelion. It didn't have any flowers today, but the whole plant is edible, and it's so super good for us. So it's food is medicine, and medicine is our food, and I think this is preventative. And there's a lot of things we forage in the garden that we might not be able to buy in the shop, and it's fresh, and it's organic, and that's one of the reasons I started eating foraged food, is because I wanted to have food grown without chemicals, which was something very hard to do way back in the early 90s. Okay, so these super salads, there's the rules again. So these super salads, I call them, are they have quite a lot of things in them. So we have over 100 plants in my garden salad that I harvested for the talk, but this particular salad has, I think it's our record from last year, or is it? So it's the same garden. Hold on, which one was it? One of these salads has 325 things in. I think it was last May, so the passion flowers. I think it was this one. Anyway, so I think I hold the unofficial record for the number of ingredients in a salad, which is 325, and it was this time last year. And I harvested over 125 the other day, which it's about speed, and at different times of year it's quicker. So we have this succession in the calendar. So in the spring there's a lot of leafy things to eat, and we're on a different edge now. We're moving into summer, so there's already new things. There's a lot of new flowers coming, there's new plants popping out, and a lot of these spring leafy plants are going into their flower cycle, like hedge garlic. So I've got some here to show you. This is hedge garlic. If you can see, it's a member of the brassica family, which is the cabbage family, and it is quite mustardy. If you can see, there's 4 petals on the flowers. That's an indication of the cabbage family. They all have these 4 flowers, and they are absolutely delicious, and they're really good for us. This is called hedge garlic, and it has actually got the same chemical components that garlic has, and it has similar benefits. But all the mustard family are very, very nutritious for us. And in that family, call the mustard family too, the brassica family. Things like kale and cabbage and broccoli, they're all in that family. And there's wild brassicas everywhere in this country. Always some on the beach, and in most hedgerows there's something. Okay, so another thing that's around at the moment is, I've got some somewhere. Oh, well, there's lots of things. Oh, we've got wild garlic flowers, and that's the leaf. It's a bit raggedy now. So the wild garlic's moved into the flowering stage, and I have to tell you that the flowers, I think, are the best bit. So I find the leaves quite strong to eat, and I look forward to the flowering stage. So we found some locally the other day on a dog walk, just loads of it, and we've been eating it in every meal. We've got a little bit in the garden, which is where I've got this today, and I'm just going to have a bit. It's just gorgeous, just a hit of garlic. So I like making pesto with these leaves, and it goes, and I steam it with other things, and it goes into some juices, but it's a very, very strong taste. So I think having the garlic flowers, wild garlic flowers, is brilliant. So a forest gardening plant, which I think is very popular, is called three-cornered leek, and this is the same family as wild garlic. It looks very similar. You can see it's an allium family, onion family. Can you see that it's very similar? And what the three-cornered leek is just a must-have if you want to have any plants in your forest garden. You can see, look, it's got 3 corners, and these grow I live in Canterbury, and in Whitstable, a lot of gardens have this as a weed. It's almost impossible to get rid of. Most people don't realise they can eat it. So it's just like, whoa, it's just so good. And you can make pesto out of it, and the flowers are great on the salad. And the leaves appear in January, so you have all these gorgeous, yummy, like chive-like leaves you can eat. Much more useful than chives, actually, because it's got a longer season. Okay, but I'm going to swap slides. Oh yeah, I meant the other point at the end of that slide was try a small amount if you've never eaten something before. So it's important, yeah. So I think if you're foraging for the first time, it's like some things are quite bitter, but I've grown to love it. Our body actually really needs bitter things. So in some of the principles of foraging, like, are theoretically yields are unlimited. And when I first started making these salads, 50 was like, whoa, we got 50 things. And then it was 80. And then my knowledge just increases. And then we went in big jumps, actually. So we went from 80 to 100, 120, 180, 230, and then last year it was 325. And it's because some of the same plants, but we can eat different bits of them. So it's not necessarily 300 plants, but maybe over 100. But like, we can eat the flowers, the young leaves of quite a lot of trees. We can eat. Got some young leaves here. Look, that's ivy. Not ivy. Not ivy. Totally not that one. Grape. It's a grapevine leaf, and they're lovely young in a salad, and we can have them cooked as well. And they're used for, they have rice rolled up in them as a special dish as well when the leaves are older and cooked. But very nice in a salad. Yeah.
Joe, would you hold that just? Joe?
It's this. Oh, yeah.
Would you hold that steady in front of the camera?
It?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the vine leaf.
Yeah, so if you've got a grapevine, you can take a leaf here and there for a salad. The plant won't mind, and it'll grow more. And they grow quite a lot of leaves at this time of year, and they're very good. So there's something about diversity. So all these different things together, especially the flowers. We don't have flowers at the vegetable shop, and there's all sorts of micronutrition that I'd love to know more about. Simon, who talked at the first talk about medicinal forest gardening, he talked about pollen in some plants. But look, this is a marigold, and it's very easy to grow. This is an old variety. I've got a different one. This is probably more common, but look how beautiful that is. And all the petals in a salad just add beautiful colour. These plants are great to grow for all the wildlife as well. The bees love it too. This is something, a mayflower, a hawthorn, Crataegus monogyna. This is a brilliant plant to eat. It's so good for us. I've heard it's a great heart tonic plant. And I think I eat this as preventative medicine, but I also think it's great. Just a great grazing plant when I'm wandering around, in my garden and on my dog walks. Just a few leaves and flowers. I eat the flowers all through the year, and I think that's quite a nice thing to be able to do. And you always eat the youngest leaves of any plant when you eat the leaves. And of course the hawthorn has berries as well. A few other things I've got here I've got
the berries are edible too, are they?
The berries are edible too on the hawthorn, yeah. You can make, I've seen Ray Mears make a fruit leather. In fact, I know other people make fruit leathers out the berries. I do dry the flowers for tea, but I just generally like grazing the hawthorn. This was an apple blossom, but it's fallen apart. But the apple blossoms are all edible, as well as the young leaves. And there's quite a lot of plants that are the same family as apple. So it's all rosaceae, I can't say that name, but rose family. This is another forest gardening plant. This is winter purslane. And it is amazing. It's a must-have, another must-have in the forest garden. And you can eat this every day of the year. And when it self-seeds in your garden, you'll have it everywhere forever in shady bits. So it's a great ground cover in a shady area. And it is so super good for us. So the purslanes apparently are one of the most nutritious plants in the world. And they have a lot of omega-3 oils in them for those people that are vegan. This is a really good plant to have too, for all of us. Another one at the moment is tulip flowers, still got a few left. Very, very pretty. I would just have a few petals on a salad. Another thing that's just flowering is a bugle or a juga. This makes a fantastic forest garden ground cover plant, which the bees love, and they flower at the same time as apple, and they're a great pollinator plant. But you can eat the leaves and the flowers. Very, very nice. Quite bitter, but good.
Could you show the flower up a bit closer?
Sure. Thank you for asking me. Isn't that beautiful? What a beautiful colour.
Yeah.
And I've got that in between paving slabs down in my garden.
Just hold it steady for a minute, because it's the picture's breaking up a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I think we can see that. Yeah.
Right. How long have I got for? Another 5 minutes?
Just 5. Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay. A few more things in my garden. Marjoram. So you might have marjoram, and that's a fantastic salad plant. You might not think to put it in a salad. I haven't told you the big trick about a salad yet. So you have to, ideally, there's 1 or 2 things, like this is the one today, that you would have a lot of that would make a good base. This is called Perennial Buckwheat. It's quite, it's not a plant I'd encourage you to, for everybody, because it's connected, it's related to Japanese knotweed, and it can take over. But if you put it in the right place, and that's what it's about, putting plants in the right place, it's absolutely delicious. And this is like a staple for me in this garden. It goes, even, we have a gap in August in the foraging year, and this can feed me every day now until probably October when the frosts come. It's an awesome plant. Also mallow, Lavatera is a fantastic plant. And I think we've got a relative of this, which is the hollyhock. So there's a hollyhock leaf. These are the same family as is hibiscus. And you can eat the flowers of all of these. And if you can, most gardens might have one of these, hollyhock or Lavatera. They are supposed to be anti-inflammatory, and they're beautiful, and the wildlife love them. And the mallow is evergreen. I mean, you can't, it's just an unbeatable plant, and that's the shrub layer. Lemon balm. Oh, it just smells gorgeous. That's so good for us. And it's a great vegetable, and it's beautiful. And again, the bees love it. I'm just going to have to eat a bit of that. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but you get the idea. So I get a base, which here's perennial buckwheat, some dandelions. I make a really nice salad dressing, usually 2/3 oil to 1/3 acid thing like vinegar, or I have to be careful with lemon juice. I find that a bit bitter, but usually I like balsamic vinegar if you can use it, to 2 parts olive oil, or that sort of combination. A little bit of salt, a few herbs, I put garlic in it, and over any salad, and it's just whoa. And I think there's so many health benefits to doing this. So like I said earlier, food is our medicine, medicine is our food, and I really do believe that. I hardly ever get ill. I only get ill when I try and do too much, which I do like to do too much. But look at those beautiful aqualegias. Sometimes I do actually put lettuce in salad, but it's rare. I do grow it. Yeah, so lots of things there. So there are lots of places to get more information, and this is a growing movement, which is such an exciting thing, because this helps us be indigenous to the natural system again. So I'm really into permaculture, and I am actually a director for the Permaculture Association. I love what they do, and they want to help more people do more permaculture, essentially. They've got a huge amount of resources on the website. The Permaculture magazine's been going for about 30 years in its current form with Maddie and Tony and the others. And they do loads of brilliant articles. And if you subscribe, you can have access to all the back issues digitally. Plants for Future, that's an awesome place to learn plants. And they have a website where you can look at, if you know the name of a plant, you can look it up and see how you can eat it and use it. They don't have every single plant on, but they've got almost everything. And that's where I go to. So if you can identify the plant, and there are apps to help you, you know, you can take a picture like with PlantNet and it identifies it, but you have to be 100% sure. And you can go on Google and look up the name and get a cross check. Ideally, if you want to expand your knowledge, find someone who knows more than you and go for a walk with them. And don't forget, different times of year will have different plants. I mentioned Food for Free already. That was the first book I ever had. Still a brilliant classic. The Agroforestry Research Trust is excellent, and they're expanding knowledge about forest gardening and producing books, mostly Martin Crawford, and also worth going to visit his gardens. And then, of course, join the Forest Gardening Scheme, who are helping inspire us to get more forest gardens in communities and sharing our knowledge generally and creating community, which is fantastic. So that's the talk, and I was going to answer a few questions.
Go for it, Joe. You've got a couple there, haven't you? I think one of them was about bindweed.
Yeah, oh yes, I forgot that one. So on the night, a few questions came up, which is great. It was like doing gardeners' questions time. It's quite fun. So bindweed. So every plant has a use. We might not, and although I believe every plant's edible, I don't know how to eat every plant, and bindweed's one of those. But I do know that bindweed is a deep mineral accumulator, which means that if you're lucky enough to have it, and have a relationship with it, then you can utilize it and make a compost tea. So you put it in a bucket, fill it with water, leave it for 10 days, and then add it to the soil, and those minerals will go back in. And the idea is that when you do that, the soil won't need to grow it so much because those minerals have been put back in. The idea that the soil's only growing bindweed so that because it needs these minerals. So it's a beautiful system, really. I have heard other people saying it's good medicine for women, and I haven't looked it up on Plants for a Future for a while, but you know, I think if we know how, if everything's edible, then I want to know how, and I'm still asking how. But every plant has a use anyway, so it's an amazing. I think that's an amazing thing to know about bindweed. So I have huge respect for it, and as a metaphor, it's got an unstoppable energy. So. If you need to get something done and you need some energy, just think about what would bindweed do. So
I think John made the point that there were different types of bindweed, right? And that some of them were actually edible and others weren't, more suitable for your compost tea, perhaps.
Yes, well, I don't know about that. So, but yes, that was Rakesh. So.
Yeah, that's right. So was there another question that leapt out at you?
Yes. Somebody asked, what's the best size for a forest garden? I thought that was a good question.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting thing to look at. And of course, you can do it at any scale, any size. You can even apply the principles to a window box. So what's interesting is where you put your forest garden changes what sort of forest garden it is. So one you have in your garden might have woodland edge, more like hedgerow plants, and herbaceous border plants, like a cottage garden, I think, is a type of forest garden. And as you go out further away, the furthest away forest garden would just be wild nature, a rewilding project maybe, or just wild places. We don't have many where I am in this part of the world. So yeah, that's my answer for that. So that reminds me of another point I wanted to make doing this talk, is that I meant to say at the beginning that we are in a pandemic at the moment, and these are lockdown seminars, which are brilliant. Thanks for doing this. But this particular skill set, making a forest garden, learning to forage, these are important skills for resilience. And the world's changing, and we need to be more resilient. And we can just depend less on supermarkets and the money system if we do this, as well as enhance our health, and most importantly, make that reconnection or deepen our connection to the natural systems, which is really essential as we go forward as human beings, finding our way back in the natural systems.
And finally, Jo, have you written about this so that people can maybe do some planning of their gardens so that they can actually have something to forage all year round? Do you have a plan that you've actually published?
It's funny you should say that. I have written a series of articles, but they're not published yet.
Okay. Where would they be published when they are published?
Well, I was hoping Permaculture magazine would, but I haven't quite figured out how to write them in a way which they can use them. But there's loads of information. And every time I sit down to write an article, it's amazing how much there is to write about for children, for health, for well-being, for nature connection, for food at different times of the year, for super salads. There's so many different aspects to this. It's really exciting. I'm quite passionate about it. Yeah. And thanks for asking me to come on and talk about it.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks ever so much for your time.